The desert wind, a tireless phantom, whispers against the reinforced steel of your solitude. It carries the scent of sun-baked earth and distant, dying things, a constant reminder of the world you've left behind, the world that abandoned you. Here, within the stark walls of the desert safehouse with portable money counter humming, time stretches and contracts, measured only by the changing angles of dust motes in the infrequent light and the low, rhythmic purr of the machine that counts the hours of your exile. You trace the rim of a chipped ceramic mug, the coffee inside long cold, mirroring the temperature of your own resolve. Marcus Blackwood. It's a sound that has become the soundtrack to your self-imposed prison. A constant low-frequency hum that vibrates through the floorboards, through your bones, a steady pulse in the otherwise deafening quiet. You don't touch the stacks of crisp bills it processes. They are simply there, a testament to a different kind of transaction, a different kind of life you maintain on the fringes, a necessary evil to fuel this barren existence. You imagine its arteries choked with the usual despair, its alleys echoing with the silent screams of forgotten souls. The news, when it penetrates this sanctuary, usually arrives as a crackle from an ancient shortwave radio, a voice from a world you'd sworn off. Today, however, it's a more visceral intrusion. A colleague, a man whose face you've tried to erase from your mind, stands at the reinforced door. He knocks, a hesitant, almost apologetic rap that nonetheless shatters the fragile peace. He knocks again, louder this time, a note of desperation in the sound. Marcus, his voice, strained and hoarse, filters through the thick metal. You need to hear this. It's happening again. The words are a bludgeon. Again. The single syllable tears through the layers of your carefully constructed apathy, striking at the raw nerve of your deepest failure. You don't move, your grip tightening on the mug until your knuckles whiten. The money counter continues its impassive count, oblivious to the tremor it sends through you. Another child, Marcus, vanished. Same age, same district, no witnesses. Just the details, sparse as they are, paint a vivid, horrifying picture, an echo from a past you've spent years trying to bury. The boy, Samuel Vance, a ghost you could never lay to rest, suddenly stands beside you, his eyes wide and accusing. You close your eyes, fighting the familiar wave of nausea, the sharp taste of bile in your throat. This is not your fight. That man died the day Samuel vanished. You are just Marcus now, a man in a desert safehouse, counting the days, the money, the cost of his mistakes. Yet, the colleague's voice, now fading as he turns to leave, carries a plea you cannot entirely ignore. They're calling it an isolated incident. But I know better. You stand motionless for a long time, the weight of the city pressing down even here, miles away. The sand outside seems to sigh, a mournful sound. Your gaze drifts to a dust-laden box in the corner, an old evidence kit you'd never fully disassembled. Inside, a worn photograph, a faded sketch, fragments of a case file that consumed your life. The new disappearance isn't just an echo, it's a direct challenge, a thread pulled from the very fabric of your past. It demands an answer, a resolution you could never deliver before. You walk to the door, your steps heavy, each one an act of defiance against the inertia that has held you captive. You don't open it immediately. You simply press your palm against the cool steel, feeling the faint vibrations of the outside world. The city, a hungry beast, calls to you. And this time, against every fiber of your being, you feel a reluctant pull to answer. The first tentative step back into the labyrinth has begun. It is a sound of sterile transaction, a counterpoint to the wild beat of your heart. The name, whispered by the departing stranger, still clings to the air, a phantom echo of a past you had painstakingly buried. Yet, here it is, a fresh wound tearing open the old. Sleep offers no escape, only fragmented visions of a child's laughing face, replaced by another, younger, equally innocent. You try to anchor yourself in the mundane, the counting of currency, the meticulous inventory of your sparse existence. Then, a vehicle disturbs the horizon, a plume of dust announcing its unwelcome arrival. The engine dies, and a figure emerges, silhouetted against the unforgiving glare of the midday sun. It is the former colleague, his shoulders stooped, his face etched with a weariness that mirrors your own. The parents, they're broken. You offer no greeting, only a steady gaze. They have the department. They have the resources. They have nothing, the former colleague retorts, his voice rising, a tremor of desperation in its depths. The official narrative is a carefully constructed lie. Another child, Marcus, 8 years old, vanished from her bed just like the last one. He pulls a crumpled photograph from his pocket, laying it on the table beside the money counter. A girl with wide, trusting eyes and a gap-toothed smile stares up at you. No witnesses. The lead detective on the case. He's calling it a runaway. A child, Marcus, a runaway. The word hangs in the air, an absurd, infuriating lie, a disgraced memory. Because you see what others refuse to. You look at the photograph, then at the former colleague, seeing the desperate hope in his eyes. The desert's quiet isolation, once a sanctuary, now feels like a prison. The weight of the city, of its lost children, presses down, demanding a reckoning. You nod, a single decisive motion. The past, it seems, demands its due. Hours later, the sun dipping below the distant mountains, you are back in the city's labyrinthine embrace. The air, thick with exhaust and the distant wail of sirens, feels both familiar and suffocating. Your first stop is the street where the child vanished, a quiet residential cul-de-sac. The official police tape, a bright yellow scar, still cordons off the house. A uniformed officer, younger than you remember them being, stands guard, his gaze shifting nervously as you approach. "Can I help you, sir?" the officer asks, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm. You offer a curt nod. "Just an old friend of the family. Paying my respects." Your eyes, however, are scanning, dissecting, absorbing every detail. The manicured lawn, the precisely placed garden gnomes, the slightly askew curtain in the child's bedroom window. You notice the fresh tire tracks on the unpaved shoulder across the street, distinct from the usual neighborhood traffic, almost too neat, as if someone had parked there with deliberate care, then pulled away without a single unnecessary turn. The police, you observe, have focused their efforts primarily on the house itself, leaving the periphery largely undisturbed. As you linger, a black sedan, sleek and anonymous, cruises slowly past. The tinted window rolls down a fraction, revealing the stern, unsmiling face of the lead detective, his eyes narrowed as they bore into yours. He offers no greeting, no gesture, only a silent, potent warning. The message is clear. Stay away. This is not your jurisdiction. The sedan glides on, disappearing around the corner, leaving behind an unsettling ripple in the otherwise placid street. They know you're here. They don't want you here. This confirms your former colleague's suspicion. The official channels are compromised, or at the very least, unwilling to look beyond their prescribed narrative. You return to the house, your gaze now drawn to the small details. The window of the child's room facing the street shows no sign of forced entry, just as the former colleague had said. But something catches your eye. A faint, almost invisible smudge on the sill, near the latch. Not a fingerprint, too broad for that, more like a transfer, a residue. You lean closer, your brow furrowed. It's too subtle for a casual glance, easily missed in the rush of an initial investigation. It suggests something pressed against the sill from the outside, something soft, yet firm enough to leave a mark. You pull a small, worn magnifying glass from your coat pocket, a relic from your past life, and examine the smudge. It's a faint, grayish-brown smear, almost like dust, but with an odd, fibrous quality. Not dirt, not pollen. It reminds you of something, a texture you've encountered before, but the memory is elusive, just beyond your grasp. This is the first crack in their perfect, tidy story. A child doesn't simply vanish from a locked room without a trace. And this trace, however faint, speaks of an external presence, a precise, deliberate action that contradicts the official runaway theory. The police, in their haste or perhaps their complicity, had overlooked it. You pocket the magnifying glass, the gritty texture of the desert still clinging to your clothes, a stark contrast to the sterile urban grime. The labyrinth, it seems, has just begun to reveal its first hidden passage. The desert's quiet isolation, once a sanctuary, now feels like a prison, its walls pressing in. The child's face, innocent and trusting, stares out from the glossy print, a mirror reflecting the unhealed wound festering deep inside you. This new disappearance, a decade later, under the same cruel moon, whispers of a pattern, a dark echo across the years. A bitter taste coats your tongue. You push the photograph back across the scarred wooden table. The details. Your voice is a rasp, unused to anything beyond the desert wind. Tell me everything again, every whisper, every shadow. The former colleague leans forward, his desperation a palpable heat. He recounts the scant facts. The child vanished from a city park near the old abandoned factory district just after dusk. No witnesses, no struggle, only a forgotten toy soldier lying in the dew-kissed grass. The factory district, the specific time of day, the age of the child. Each piece a broken shard of a memory you've tried to bury. The air was sharp, carrying the metallic tang of rain and the acrid scent of burnt sugar from the derelict confectionery plant. You were younger then, sharper, perhaps, but no less burdened. The searchlights cut through the swirling mist, painting the frantic faces of the search party in stark relief. The child's mother, her voice a raw, keening sound, tore through the night. The toy train, its red paint chipped, lay half buried in the mud near the old loading docks. The former colleague is still speaking, his words blurring into the phantom echoes of that past failure. The guilt, a familiar companion, settles heavy on your shoulders. You had promised that child's family justice, and you had failed. Now the past was not just returning, it was demanding its due. I need to go back, you state, the words a decision forged in the crucible of regret. To the city. The journey is a blur of desert highways and the growing tension in your gut. The city, a sprawling beast of concrete and forgotten dreams, greets you with its usual indifferent roar. Your first stop is a precinct house, a place you once called home, laced with an undercurrent of disdain. Long time no see, former detective. The word hangs in the air, a barb meant to sting. I'm here about the missing child, you say, ignoring the slight. The new one. I have information. A young officer, barely out of the academy, approaches, his face a mask of wary curiosity. The detective in charge is busy. He says, a rehearsed politeness that barely masks his suspicion. This isn't your jurisdiction anymore. Just tell the lead investigator that the circumstances are eerily similar to the Blackwood case from 10 years ago. The city remembers, not your triumphs, but your failures. You make your way to the old district, the labyrinthine alleys behind the abandoned factory where the first child vanished. The air here is thick with the smell of damp concrete and decay. Graffiti scars the brick walls, cryptic messages in faded paint. A small, dimly lit convenience store, tucked between two crumbling warehouses, catches your eye. Old Man Hemlock, a proprietor whose memory was as long as his beard was white. still presides over his cluttered domain. The bell above the door jingles, a forlorn sound. Marcus Blackwood, Hemlock says, his voice raspy, his eyes, rheumy with age, narrowing. He doesn't offer a smile, but there's no overt hostility either, just a weary resignation. Thought you'd gone for good. Some things don't stay buried, Hemlock, you reply, picking up a dusty can of beans. Tell me about the recent disappearance. Anything you've heard. Hemlock sighs, wiping down a counter with a stained rag. Same old story, ain't it? Kids vanish. Cops scratch their heads. Only difference is, this time, they're not blaming you. A dry, mirthless chuckle escapes him. But there's talk, you know. The one who likes to take things that don't belong to him. Small things, precious things. He pauses, then adds, almost an afterthought. And he always leaves a calling card, they say. A small, carved wooden bird. The collector. You remember finding one, clutched in the hand of a terrified witness, a child too young to articulate the horror she'd seen. A detail you dismissed as a child's toy, a red herring in the chaos. The new case was not just similar. It was a continuation. And this time, you would not fail. Your breath catches, a ragged shard in your throat. The collector. The name, a chilling phantom from your past investigation, slams into you with the force of a physical blow. Now the echo of that name is a siren song, pulling you back into the mire you swore you'd left behind. It's a thread, thin and frayed, but the only one you possess, and you grasp it with the desperate grip of a man clinging to the edge of an abyss. The city exhales a stale breath as you navigate its forgotten arteries. This is where the city's true pulse beats, a low, illicit thrum beneath the veneer of order. The structure itself is a deception. From the outside, a nondescript, windowless block of sun-baked concrete, indistinguishable from the abandoned factories and warehouses that line this desolate stretch. But as you push open the unmarked steel door, the world shifts. The air inside is cool, dry, carrying the faint scent of ozone and something vaguely chemical. The room is sparsely furnished. A scarred metal table, 2 folding chairs, and a single unshaded bulb casting a harsh, unforgiving light. In the corner, almost camouflaged against the drab wall, sits a figure. He is the gatekeeper, the silent arbiter of this hidden commerce. You meet his gaze, a quiet challenge passing between you. No words are exchanged, none are needed. He simply gestures with a tilt of his head toward the table. You slide a folded photograph across the worn surface. The missing child's face, innocent and smiling, stark against the grim reality of this place. The gatekeeper's eyes flick to it, then back to you. He turns his head slightly, as if listening to something beyond your hearing. Sometimes, it's the kind that leaves no trace. As he speaks, his hand, gnarled and scarred, slowly pushes a small, intricately carved wooden piece across the table towards you. It's a familiar design, the signature of the collector, but subtly altered. A new symbol has been etched into its side, a stylized, almost geometric representation of a bird, its wings outstretched as if in flight. A new brand, a new identifier, beyond memory. At that moment, a muffled voice echoes from a deeper recess of the safehouse, carried on the hum of the money counter. The next shipment is due. Early morning. Confirm the manifest. We can't afford any more. Shipment, merchandise, misplaced goods. This isn't just about a vanished child, or even 2. This is about a network, an organized operation dealing in something far more sinister, far more expansive than a simple abduction. You pick up the wooden piece, its polished surface cool beneath your fingertips, the new symbol a burning question mark. The gatekeeper watches you, his face unreadable, a silent testament to the depths of the depravity you have just glimpsed. You have your cryptic evidence, a disturbing piece of the puzzle, but it only opens a new, more terrifying door. The labyrinth deepens. The words still gnawed at you, a corrosive acid in the quiet chambers of your mind. Shipment, merchandise, misplaced goods. They echoed, stripping away the comforting lie of isolated tragedy, revealing a vast, cold expanse beneath. The city, once a familiar sprawl of shadowed alleys and indifferent facades, now felt like a living organism, its veins pumping something vile, something bought and sold. Your determination, long dormant, flared to a steady, relentless heat. You moved with a renewed, almost desperate energy. The stale air of your apartment, usually a refuge, became a cage. The old case files, once a mausoleum of regret, transformed into a battle map. The faces of the missing children, spectral and accusing, propelled you forward, past the exhaustion, past the gnawing doubt. Your first move was to tap the fringes, the forgotten corners where information, however tainted, often pooled. He met you in the hushed gloom of a forgotten diner, the smell of stale coffee and desperation clinging to the vinyl booths. His eyes, wary and darting, met yours with a flicker of recognition. Then fear. "You're digging where you shouldn't, Marcus," the stranger rasped, his voice a low growl, barely audible over the clatter of distant dishes. He pushed a lukewarm mug across the table, the ceramic rough against your fingertips. They don't like it when you stir the pot. You leaned closer, your gaze unwavering. "Tell me about the merchandise, the shipments." He glanced around, his movements jerky, before leaning in so close you could feel his hot breath on your ear. "It ain't just through, Marcus. It's to and from a whole network. They got a place way out where the sand eats secrets." As you stepped back onto the grimy pavement, the city's symphony of sirens and distant shouts felt sharper, more menacing. Its windows, tinted to an opaque black, offered no glimpse of its occupants. You quickened your pace, weaving through the late-night foot traffic, but the sedan pulled away from the curb, a silent predator maintaining a casual distance. The awareness solidified, hardening into certainty. You were being watched. Your every movement, every turn was observed. The feeling was insidious, a violation that crept under your skin. You tried to lose them, ducking into a crowded market, then cutting through a labyrinthine alleyway choked with overflowing dumpsters. For a moment, you thought you'd succeeded. The street behind you was empty, save for the distant glow of a neon sign. But then, as you rounded a blind corner, a sudden brutal force slammed into your back. You stumbled forward, the air knocked from your lungs, before being spun around and shoved against the rough brick wall, faceless in the dim light. Loomed over you, a silent, powerful presence. No words were exchanged, no demands made. Only a fist, hard and unforgiving, connecting with your jaw. The impact sent a jolt of pain through your skull, a white flash behind your eyes. You tasted blood, metallic and hot, as another blow landed, this one to your gut, stealing your breath. You slumped, momentarily winded, but the years of street fighting, the ingrained instinct for survival kicked in. You lashed out, a wild, desperate swing that connected with something solid, eliciting a grunt. But your assailant was too strong, too disciplined. He grabbed your shirt, lifting you slightly before slamming you back against the wall, the impact rattling your teeth. "Stay out of it, Marcus," a low, guttural voice hissed, close to your ear, devoid of any discernible emotion. It was a statement, not a plea. This isn't your game anymore. The grip on your shirt tightened, then just as suddenly released. You slid down the wall, your body protesting, a fresh wave of pain blossoming across your ribs. You pushed yourself up, every muscle screaming in protest. Your jaw throbbed, and a dull ache settled deep in your chest. The warning had been delivered, stark and undeniable. They knew you were digging. They knew you were close. The napkin, still clutched in your hand, felt heavier, more significant. The pain was a sharp, clarifying fire. It didn't deter you. It hardened you. You were no longer just chasing ghosts. You were a marked man, and the hunt had become personal. You would find this desert safe house, and you would uncover every twisted secret it held. Your ribs screamed with each shallow breath, a dull throb echoing the rhythm of your own determined pulse. The encounter in the alley, the silent assailant, had left its mark, a stark reminder of the peril coiling tighter around you. You had driven for hours, the city lights fading to a distant shimmer, seeking refuge, a place where the shadows held no immediate threats, only answers. The structure emerged from the twilight, a squat, unassuming block of concrete and weathered metal, a phantom against the vast star-strewn canvas. You had learned of its existence years ago, a whisper in a forgotten informant's dying breath, its purpose now serving your own desperate quest. The lock, a simple mechanism, yielded to your practiced hands. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of stale cigarettes and something metallic. Old blood, perhaps, or just the ghost of iron. Its hum was a constant, unsettling companion, a backdrop to the quiet storm brewing within you. You moved with a grim efficiency, ignoring the protest of your bruised flesh. The small, cluttered space offered a single, flickering fluorescent bulb. Under its harsh glare, you laid out your meager collection of evidence. A faded photograph of the missing child from years ago. A recent missing persons flyer. Cryptic notes from your clandestine inquiries. The single, peculiar button you'd found near the current disappearance site. A small, tarnished silver disc, etched with a stylized serpent. You ran a hand over the cold metal of its casing, a sudden thought sparking. Why leave it running? A distraction? A warning? Or simply a careless oversight by someone who believed themselves beyond suspicion? You began to cross-reference, to hunt for the elusive thread. The original case files, brittle with age, spoke of dead ends, of vanished leads, of a child swallowed whole by the city's maw. You had seen it before, not on a button, but in a peripheral detail from the old case. A child's drawing, dismissed as childish fancy, depicting a snake-like creature entwined around a stylized letter, M. Your gaze swept the safe house. The money counter suggested the financial arm. What else lay hidden? You ran your hands along the rough concrete walls, searching for seams, for false panels. A loose brick near the floor gave way with a soft scrape. Behind it, a small recess, not empty. Your fingers closed around a hard drive, cool and heavy, and a slim, leather-bound ledger. The money counter's hum seemed to intensify, a frantic buzz in your ears. This was it. This was the heart of the serpent. You connected the hard drive to a worn, old laptop you carried, your fingers flying across the keys, bypassing rudimentary security. The screen glowed, illuminating a labyrinth of encrypted files. The ledger, meanwhile, was filled with rows of dates, alphanumeric codes, and staggering sums of currency. It wasn't just a record of payments, it was a manifest. The first breakthrough hit you like a physical blow. The alphanumeric codes in the ledger, when cross-referenced with your old case notes, matched specific dates and locations associated with the original child's disappearance. Not just the disappearance, but also the subsequent, frustratingly untraceable movements of several key figures who had been briefly questioned, then inexplicably released, their alibis ironclad despite your instincts. Then came the deeper cut. The hard drive contained a series of encrypted communications. These weren't random acts. They were meticulously planned operations, spanning years. The serpent symbol, you now realized, was a recurring motif, a signature. It was on letterheads, embedded in file names, even crudely drawn in one of the digital documents, a mark of ownership, of a widespread network. The true horror unfolded as you delved deeper. The communications weren't just about the operations themselves. They were about control. Control over information, over investigations, over people. Not just faceless operatives, but codes that, with a jolt of ice through your veins, you recognized. These weren't just codes. They were aliases for individuals you had known, trusted. A retired precinct captain, praised for his community outreach. A former colleague, lauded for his impeccable record. A judge, whose pronouncements on justice had always seemed unimpeachable. The police force. Your force. The institution you had dedicated your life to, the one you had believed in, even after its betrayal of you. It wasn't just corrupt in pockets. It was compromised at a fundamental level, entwined in this predatory coil. This wasn't a copycat. It was a continuation, an ongoing enterprise, protected and enabled by the very guardians of the city. The child from years ago, the child now missing. They were not isolated tragedies, but victims of a meticulously maintained, deeply rooted system. You had walked among them, fought beside them, and all the while, the serpent had been coiling, tightening its grip, its fangs sunk deep into the heart of everything you once held sacred. Not phantom whispers, but concrete identities, etched into the digital ledger before you. A retired precinct captain, whose public image shimmered with philanthropic grace, his speeches on civic duty memorized by schoolchildren. A former colleague, whose meticulous case files you had once admired, his commendations framed proudly in the precinct's main hall. These weren't mere cogs in a machine. They were the very gears, polished and respected, that had held your city's moral fabric together, or so you had believed. The money counter hummed its low, rhythmic mantra, a mechanical heartbeat against the vast, indifferent silence of the desert night. Your gaze, heavy with betrayal, swept across the screen, linking the aliases to their true faces. They had moved with impunity, cloaked by their reputations, their influence a silent poison in the city's veins. You leaned closer, your breath fogging the cool glass of the monitor. The data wasn't just a list of transactions. It was a chronicle of meticulously planned disappearances, stretching back years, far beyond the child who had first haunted your waking hours. Each entry, a child's name, an age, a date, followed by a coded destination and a payment record. This wasn't random predation. This was a selection. Your fingers, steady despite the tremor in your soul, navigated through archived reports, cross-referencing the database with news clippings you'd hoarded, with the ghost files from your own disgraced career. The retired captain, lauded for his community outreach programs, had, in fact, been instrumental in identifying these vulnerable children, gaining their families' trust under the guise of aid. The pieces began to coalesce, forming a horrifying mosaic. It wasn't simple human trafficking for labor or sexual exploitation. The meticulous selection criteria, the lack of demands, the systemic cover-ups. It all pointed to something far more sinister, a purpose steeped in a twisted ideology. They spoke of the Great Restoration, of purifying the lineage, of sacred vessels and chosen spirits. The children, your mind reeled, were not commodities but ingredients. They were being groomed, brainwashed, perhaps even subjected to horrific rituals, all in service of a cultish belief system that promised its adherents power, longevity, and a new world order built on the backs of stolen innocence. The mastermind, the architect referenced in the texts, wasn't a single person but a council, a clandestine cabal of influential figures who saw themselves as the true inheritors of the city's future. The retired captain and the former colleague were but two visible extensions of this hydra-headed beast. They had established an empire, not of land or wealth, but of human potential, harvesting the pure, the gifted, the vulnerable, for their own grotesque ends. This wasn't just a child abduction case. It was a deeply entrenched system, a sprawling network of corruption and depravity spanning years, decades even. An empire built on stolen children, on corrupted trust, on the very foundations of the city you once swore to protect. The fight ahead would be long, fraught with unseen dangers, but the clarity of your purpose was absolute. The desert wind howled outside, a lonely lament. But within the safehouse, a fire of grim determination had been kindled. The names, still vibrating in the air like plucked strings, were more than just entries on a ledger. They were anchors, dragging the city's underbelly into the unforgiving light of your scrutiny. The digital ledger, a cold mirror, reflected a corrupted world, its truths etched in cold, hard data. It was the soundtrack to your unraveling, the rhythm of illicit commerce thrumming through the thin, dry air that tasted of dust and desperation. Your fingers, calloused with years of pursuit and regret, danced across the cool glass of the tablet, sifting through encrypted files, cross-referencing timestamps, following the faint digital breadcrumbs. The retired precinct captain's name, specifically, snagged your focus, a burr beneath your skin. His public image, once a bastion of civic virtue, now crumbled into a grotesque parody of itself, revealing the rot beneath. The date was tomorrow, and the purpose, though veiled in coded language, screamed of a final disposition, a severing of all ties, a burial of the current missing child's last hope. This was the linchpin, the opportunity to expose the entire sprawling rot. This was it, the moment, the chance to break the chain. But it was a fragile thread, easily snapped. They were good, skilled at slipping through cracks, but this was different. Involving them would not just put them at risk, it would sign their death warrant, expose them to a system that would crush them without a second thought. The choice, sharp and agonizing, cleaved your heart. To save the innocent, to expose the guilty, you had to walk this path alone. Drop it, for your own good. The words tasted like ash, each syllable a deliberate lie, a shard of betrayal you inflicted upon yourself for their protection. You heard the sigh on the other end, a mixture of frustration and resignation. The connection severed. The bridge, carefully built over weeks of clandestine exchanges, now lay in ashes. You were truly alone now, a solitary wolf baying at the moon of a corrupt city. The weight of your decision pressed down, a crushing burden, but beneath it, a steely resolve began to harden. There was no going back, no turning away. It had to be undeniable, irrefutable. You would not just observe, you would infiltrate. You would secure the evidence yourself, a direct strike at the heart of their operation. This meant putting everything on the line. Your life, your tattered reputation, the last vestiges of your hope for redemption. The plan formed, a precarious dance on the edge of a precipice. You would become the ghost in their machine, the wrench in their gears. The risk was immense, the guarantee of success non-existent, and the possibility of survival, a flickering candle in a hurricane. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the desert sky in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, you packed the barest essentials. Then, with a breath that tasted of dust and grim determination, you stepped out, leaving the sterile quiet behind, walking toward the vast, indifferent landscape and the terrifying, solitary gamble that lay ahead. The taste of ash still lingered, a phantom bitterness on your tongue, even as the hum of the city faded behind you. The lie, spoken for their protection, echoed in the hollow space where trust used to reside. But now the path forward was clear, stripped bare of pretense or partnership. It was a solitary pilgrimage into the maw of the beast, a journey you had meticulously planned, each step a calculated risk, The desert wind, a parched whisper, greeted you as your vehicle crunched onto the gravel track. Dust, fine as powdered bone, plumed behind the tires, a fleeting shroud for your approach. Its corrugated metal walls shimmered under the bruised twilight sky, a stark, ugly scar on the ancient landscape. It was a sound you had memorized from your clandestine visits, a low, mechanical purr that spoke of illicit transactions, of lives reduced to digits. You moved with the stealth of a desert predator, your boots disturbing only the smallest pebbles. The air grew thick with the metallic tang of impending confrontation, a scent you knew intimately from a life lived on the precipice. A faint light bled from a single grimy window of the safehouse. Through it, a tableau of illicit commerce unfolded. Two figures, their faces obscured by the distance and the grime, hunched over a table. One, a burly figure with the posture of a seasoned enforcer, counted stacks of bills, feeding them into the relentless maw of the money counter. The other, a smaller, wirier individual, scribbled furiously in a ledger, his movements precise, almost clerical. This was your target, the ledger keeper, the one who documented the network's financial arteries, the man whose meticulous records could unravel the entire operation. You circled the structure, assessing the weak points, the angles of attack. The desert offered no cover beyond its own vastness, no urban clutter to hide behind. It was raw, exposed, a perfect stage for the trap you were about to spring. This wasn't about brute force. It was about precision, about leveraging their overconfidence against them. A derelict generator shed stood a short distance away, its door hanging ajar, groaning faintly in the breeze. Perfect. You slipped inside, the air thick with the smell of stale oil and rust. With practiced ease, you began to prepare. The goal was not to engage in a protracted firefight, but to create a momentary chaos, a precise window of opportunity. The enforcer, you knew from your intel, possessed a short temper and an even shorter fuse. The ledger keeper, on the other hand, was a creature of habit, reliant on order. Disrupt the order, and you disrupt the man. You position the magnet and the listening device near the generator's fuel line, a silent promise of disruption. Then you retreated, finding a vantage point behind a cluster of cholla cacti, the spines like tiny, watchful eyes. The waiting began, a taut string of seconds stretching into an eternity. Your breath was shallow, your focus absolute. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang ripped through the quiet. The generator, which had been dormant, sputtered to life, roaring with an angry cough before dying again, leaving an acrid smell in the air. This was your signal. The enforcer, as predicted, exploded from the safehouse, cursing a blue streak, heading straight for the offending generator shed. As he fumbled with the shed door, his back to you, you moved. Swift as a ghost, silent as the desert night, you were on him. Your arm clamped around his throat, cutting off his shout. The pistol butt, a heavy thud against his temple, sent him crumpling to the dust like a sack of stones. Now for the ledger keeper. You burst through the safehouse door, the sudden intrusion of violent rupture in the quiet hum of the money counter. The ledger keeper, startled, looked up from his meticulous entries, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. He was smaller than you anticipated, his face pale and etched with anxiety, spectacles perched precariously on his nose. He clutched the ledger to his chest like a lifeline. "Don't move," you commanded, your voice a low, gravelly rumble that filled the small space. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. His gaze darted to the now empty doorway, then back to you, fear blooming in his eyes. He was a cornered animal, not a fighter. "The ledger," you stated, your hand outstretched. "Give it to me." He hesitated, his fingers tightening around the worn leather. You've been documenting every transaction, every name, every drop-off. You're the heart of their operation, the keeper of their secrets. You gestured to the humming machine. That machine counts their ill-gotten gains. Your book tells me where it all goes. His resolve fractured. His eyes flickered to the stacks of currency, then to the silent pistol in your hand. With a shuddering sigh, he slowly, reluctantly, extended the ledger towards you. His fingers trembled as he released his grip. You took the book, its cover surprisingly smooth beneath your touch. The pages, filled with neat, cramped script, held the final, undeniable pieces of evidence you needed. Names, dates, locations. The entire sprawling conspiracy laid bare in ink. The ledger keeper slumped back in his chair, defeated, his shoulders hunched. The relentless hum of the money counter seemed to mock his surrender. The trap had sprung. The bait had been taken. And now, armed with the truth, you were ready to confront the mastermind, to finally bring the entire rotten structure crashing down. The desert wind outside seemed to howl its approval, a fitting overture to the storm that was about to break. Its pages, brittle and yellowed, rustled with the weight of hidden truths. The ledger keeper, eyes hollowed by fear, recoiled slightly as you took the book. A silent plea for oblivion etched into his pallid face. You flipped open the cover. The precise, almost elegant script within belied the ugliness of its content. Dates, names, some coded, some disturbingly familiar, and sums, vast and chilling. It detailed a network, not just of money laundering, but of human trafficking, a spiderweb spun across the city's underbelly. Each entry was a thread, leading inevitably to the next, weaving a tapestry of exploitation. Your gaze snagged on a series of codes, then a specific address, an abandoned factory on the city's forgotten edge. The ledger wasn't just about money. It was about lives. And then a name, scrawled almost carelessly at the bottom of a particularly damning page, linked to the logistics of the operation. It was a name you knew, a name that echoed from your past, from the early days of the first child's disappearance. A name that had offered condolences, feigned concern, even provided assistance during the initial fruitless search. The architect. A shadow fell over the ledger. You looked up. There, standing in the archway that led to the safehouse's main chamber, was the organization's leader. Her posture was relaxed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips, as if she were merely observing a peculiar exhibit. So few look beyond the obvious. You pushed the ledger across the table, its pages splayed open to the damning entry. You were there, weren't you? At the memorial, offering comfort. All while orchestrating this horror. Your voice was low, laced with a bitter fury that had festered for years. She walked toward the table, her gaze sweeping over the ledger keeper, who cowered further into his chair. A necessary performance. To maintain appearances. To ensure no one suspected the true nature of the enterprise. She picked up a loose page, her fingers tracing the meticulous handwriting. It's a business, Marcus. Supply and demand. The city's elite have appetites. We merely cater to them. Children, you spat. You traffic in children. Her smile widened, devoid of warmth. A regrettable but profitable commodity. And yes, your initial case, the boy who vanished all those years ago. He was our first, a test run. The girl recently, a more refined operation. Both, I assure you, are still available. A flicker of hope, raw and desperate, pierced through the anger. Still alive? Where are they? Patience, Marcus, all in good time. But first, we must discuss your future. She reached into her jacket, not for a weapon, but for a small, gleaming device. A signal jammer. The money counter's hum seemed to falter for a split second, then resumed, oblivious. You see, you've become a nuisance, a loose end. The ledger keeper has already spoken. And this, you tapped the ledger, is going to every authority I can reach. She chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. Do you truly believe anyone will listen to a disgraced detective with a vendetta? You're a ghost, Marcus, a whisper in the wind. Your word means nothing. Her eyes darted to the ledger keeper. And his. His means even less once he's disappeared. The air crackled with unspoken threats. You knew he was right about your credibility, but you had anticipated this. Your gaze dropped to the small, almost invisible device clipped to your lapel. A tiny microphone broadcasting everything to a pre-arranged, encrypted channel. The ledger, the confession, the location, all being meticulously documented. Perhaps my word means nothing, you conceded, your eyes never leaving hers. But the truth, when laid bare, has a way of finding its own voice. She took another step closer, her hand reaching for the ledger. A pretty sentiment. But reality is far less poetic. This ledger, this proof, it will vanish with you. Her fingers brushed against the worn leather. In that instant, you moved. Your hand, swift and decisive, snapped out, not to strike her, but to grab the ledger, yanking it back. Your other hand came up, leveling the pistol. The money counter continued its monotonous count, oblivious to the sudden shift in the desert safehouse's deadly ballet. The game is over, you stated, your voice firm, resolute. The children will be found, and you will face every consequence. Her eyes narrowed, the last vestiges of her composed facade crumbling. You think this is an ending? It's merely a new beginning. For me, for the organization, and for your regrets. But you saw past the bravado. You saw the slight tremor in her hand, the sudden loss of that unwavering confidence. The ledger, now clutched tightly in your grasp, was more than just paper and ink. It was leverage. It was hope. It was the key to unlocking the fate of the missing children, a mix of desperate relief and the lingering tragedy of lives irrevocably scarred. The ledger, a thin sheaf of paper and malice, felt heavy in your grip. Its weight was the culmination of years, of ghosts and whispers. The woman, the one you'd known as a colleague, stood before you, her carefully constructed facade crumbling like dry earth. The tremor in her hand had spread, a visible shudder through her frame, betraying the icy calm he had cultivated for so long. Her eyes, once sharp and calculating, now held a frantic desperation, a cornered animal's last flicker of fight. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice a brittle shard. "You can't expose this, it's too big." But you saw past the bravado, past the fear. You didn't need to speak. The truth, now laid bare, spoke volumes. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable. The hidden recording device in your pocket, activated moments before, had captured her frantic admission, a final damning piece to the puzzle. A sudden, sharp crack shattered the stillness. Not a gunshot, but the sound of heavy boots on the stone floor outside. The organization's enforcers, drawn by her panic or perhaps by a silent alarm, were here. You moved, a blur of motion honed by years of instinct. The ledger, your precious cargo, was tucked securely inside your jacket. The door burst inward, splintering wood. Not one of theirs. A different set of boots, lighter, swifter, followed. Then a flash of official issue uniform. Your gamble had paid off. The carefully curated information, leaked to a single trusted contact within the city's law enforcement, had been enough. Not to bring them all down, not yet, but to create the necessary distraction, the window of opportunity. The ensuing minutes were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Orders barked, the sharp snap of handcuffs, the dull thud of bodies hitting the floor. The corrupt colleague, her face a mask of disbelief and fury, was swiftly apprehended. You watched, a detached observer, as the edifice of her power collapsed around her. This was the immediate aftermath, the violent, necessary excision of a festering wound. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams of light filtering through the grimy windows. illuminating stacks of shrink-wrapped currency. The air, thick with the scent of ozone and old paper, vibrated with the steady, rhythmic whir-click-whir of the counting machine. You stood by a reinforced steel table, watching a team of federal agents, the uncorrupted few, meticulously cataloging the illicit gains. Millions. The lifeblood of the organization, now drained and collected. Each bill represented a child's lost future, a family's shattered hope. The lead agent, a man whose face was etched with weary integrity, approached you. "Marcus Blackwood," he said, the name a statement, not a question. Your information was precise. The ledger, it cracked them wide open. We're still unraveling the full scope, but the network is crippled. The children, Marcus, we found them. The words hung in the air, a fragile, precious gift. We found them. Not all of them untouched, not all of them whole, but found. Others older, scarred but alive, were in the slow, painstaking process of recovery. A wave of profound exhaustion washed over you, a weariness that settled deep in your bones. The victory was immense, but the price had been heavy. Later, as the desert sky turned a bruised purple, you found yourself alone outside the safehouse. The portable money counter still hummed faintly within, a distant mechanical heartbeat. You thought of the first child, the one who had haunted your waking hours and tormented your dreams. His fate, too, had been laid bare by the ledger. Not the happy reunion you had always yearned for, but a definitive, tragic end. The truth, even when bitter, was a form of absolution. The not knowing had been a relentless torment. The knowing, a devastating peace. You looked at it, truly looked at it, for the first time in years, without the crushing weight of guilt. You had done what you could. You had followed the threads, faced down the demons, and ultimately, you had brought light to the hidden places. Redemption wasn't a medal or a public apology. It was this quiet understanding, this acceptance of the past, and the slow, arduous work of building a future. The scars remained, etched deep into your soul, but they were no longer festering wounds. You took a deep breath, filling your lungs with the clean, vast emptiness. The lingering tension in your shoulders began to ease, a slow unraveling of knots tied too tight for too long. Your life was forever changed, but the path ahead, though uncertain, no longer felt like a dead end. It felt, for the first time in a very long time, open.